Hey guys, Tom Barclay here after Tottenham's last-gasp 2-1 win against Coventry in the Carabao Cup. Never in doubt, eh? Never in doubt. That was quite a game from Ange Postecoglou's side, and not in a good way, barring the last few minutes. So Coventry took the lead through Brennan Thomas Asante, well-deserved lead. About 63 minutes, and Spurs looked like they were going out of the cup at this stage for the second successive year under Postecoglou. And then Djed Spence came off the bench, as did Brennan Johnson, and they both scored late on to turn it around. But wow, that was close. I don't think you can really get away from the fact that was pretty dire. 88 minutes, Postecoglou would push back on that, and I'll come on to his quotes later. He thinks that wouldn't be to dismiss Coventry. They're a good team, as we've seen. They made 7 changes themselves, and I suppose this is where Tottenham are at with their lacking in confidence at the moment under Postecoglou. He talks about Brennan Johnson lacking confidence the other day, and I think that's pretty relevant to quite a lot of his players, to be honest. And when you make this many changes, that's only going to disrupt any kind of rhythm your team has got anyway. But again, we'll come on to that in a bit. But I think overall they were pretty lucky. They were lucky that Coventry didn't finish them off when they could have. They missed a couple of good chances, and Mark Robins, you've got to feel for poor Mark Robins. Very good manager at this level. He's been taking Coventry. I remember covering when I used to cover the Football League. Coventry were League Two. He's brought them all the way up, and obviously came so near to the Premier League with the playoff final a couple of years ago, which they lost on penalties, and then Man United in the FA Cup, which they were so close to beating in the FA Cup semi-final last year. So this is another real sucker punch right at the end for them. So you've got to feel for him. But obviously this is a Spurs video, so we'll focus more on them. 8 changes. I knew we got the sense that was going to happen, even if that was risky, and so it proved to be. I mean, Fraser Forster has not played a game before tonight since this stage last year, literally more than a year. That was August, that Fulham game, and you could really tell. He did actually make some couple of good saves, but he looked nervy in possession. Right from the first 44 seconds, I counted it, where he had a pretty terrible pass out to Lucas Bergvall, which the excellent Jack Rudoni sort of leapt on, had a shot, and Forster managed to turn it around the post. But that was a sort of warning early on, and in possession, Forster looked nervy as anything, but so did a lot of the back line, to be honest. I think I tweeted throughout that pretty much all of them would have had the Spurs fans having kittens, barring a doggy, throughout that first half. All of them in possession, having moments on the ball which were really quite worrying. But Forster in particular kept dropping high balls as well. I mean, there were times when, obviously Vicario's come in for a lot of criticism about his dominance in the air, and you thought, well, Forster, to be fair, sort of did manage to claim some high balls, and then he'd drop it. So that was quite worrying. And he had that amazing moment in the second half where he came out, and at first we thought we'd taken out a Coventry player, which is what a lot of the Coventry fans thought, wondering why nothing had been given. The ball then came on to Hadji Wright, who had an open goal pretty much, but got denied by an excellent Ben Davies sliding challenge. But it turns out, we had no replays in the ground, so people watching on TV would have actually got a better view of this. But it sounds like he cleared out Dragazin rather than a Coventry player, so just a bit of a haphazard game from Forster. But it wasn't just him. A lot of players looked short of minutes, and I guess that was the reason for playing them. But given the form they've been in, 7 defeats in the last 11 games in the league, and the importance that this game particularly had because of the desperation to win a cup, it felt risky, and to be honest, it came very, very close to backfiring. And when you're writing your match report on a game like this, on a night game, well, let's be honest, any game now, because we have to file pretty much on the whistle, which means before or on 90 minutes, or when the game finishes, you're starting to think, wow, this was a real big moment. But obviously they turned it around, which meant for a swift rewrite. But I don't think that really can gloss over how close they came and how thoroughly unconvincing they were for most of the game. I'm sort of sticking on the negative to start off with, and then we'll come on to a few of the positives. But Timo Werner really struggled. I mean, I know Spurs fans have really been sort of hard on him, and I think at times it's been a little bit harsh. I do think he's a limited player, but he can bring certain qualities to the team with his pace and reliability with his cutting the ball back. But there was really none of that tonight. He was running down blind alleys, and his distribution was poor as well. So any critics of his, of which there seemed to be quite a lot, only had sort of further fuel today from that performance. And then he came off with what looked to be an injury. Postecoglou afterwards said that he wasn't quite sure his situation in terms of that. Solanke really didn't even get a kick, barely got into the game, and that's got to be a worry. You're playing against a championship side, making lots of changes. One thing doing that against Arsenal and North London derby, and he's obviously coming back from a recent injury, and he's a new team that he's joined. He's going to try to settle in, but yeah, I wasn't surprised when he came off because he was just not affecting the game at all. And it's really early days, so you cannot judge him at this point. But that doesn't mask the fact that it was a pretty ineffectual performance. And the goal itself was very easy from Coventry's point of view. A nice ball across, good finish, but yeah, defending was poor. I mean, there's more to it than that. I'm sure Spurs fans will go on and on about their frustrations with this particular game, but obviously they won, so let's turn it around and start talking about the positive. And the easy start, before we get onto the goal scorers, Kulusevski I thought made a big difference. It was kind of hard when you're doing your match report, you kind of head down, starting to write certain things. So late things that happen in the game, obviously you have to make sure you're aware of any big moments. But sometimes it can be harder to tell unless you'll watch it back later. Players who come on to affect the game but don't make sort of significant contributions like assists or goals. But it did seem like Kulusevski, who had been warming up a lot in the first half, I kind of thought he might come out half time, to be honest, the way it was going, did make a big difference. And then on to Spence and Johnson. So to start off with Spence, I mean, everyone knows what a difficult time he's had at Spurs. A lot of it seems like to a certain extent to his own making. Conte, it's not his fault at all that Conte sort of branded him a club signing. He never really got a look in under him, but then he was loaned out to Leeds. That was supposed to be for a season. Got caught short because they weren't happy with his attitude. Then he went to Genoa, who could have bought him but didn't. And then he seems to have knuckled down. He's come back into this team now, into Spurs sort of reckoning. Postecoglou's been pretty impressed with his attitude, even though he's to the point of saying he's going to be a huge part to play this season, albeit he's not in the Europa League squad. So he came on at half time and obviously got the goal. Good finish, kind of similar to what we saw from him from an attacking point of view from pre-season. So that is a positive. And then Johnson, interesting story himself. He obviously has come in for a lot of stick to the point where he actually turned off his Instagram account earlier this week following North London derby after getting fan abuse. And I've talked a lot about that in the last video I did ahead of this game and how that's just wrong, no matter what you think of his performances, which are totally fair to criticise. It shouldn't go overboard in that way, but must feel good from his point of view to have been the match winner. And he took it really well. Lovely ball from Bentancur, and you could see him racing on. You thought, okay, this is really on here, and a lovely finish. So hopefully that will do them world of good and confidence. So that was definitely a positive. Now moving on to Ange's comments after the game, he was asked if talked about being a flat performance. He said that was a little unfair, which I don't really agree. I think it was pretty not great for most of it. He praised Coventry for being very good. He did admit they hung in there at times and they struggled to sort of get a footing in the game, but he did feel like the spirit they showed towards the end of the game, which is what we saw a lot, as he said, last season. You think of Sheffield United, think of Liverpool, think of those last minute turnarounds, which happened quite a lot, is something that they have lacked so far this season. He said the performances have been good, have been there, but maybe some of that spirit has not been there. And so he is taking that, I guess, as a positive going forward and hoping he can bring more of that into the team, hoping that instills more belief, which I guess is what you'd expect a manager to say, but I guess it's also true. On the changes, he said he sort of understands, I guess, why there would be worries about that many changes, but he's always backed himself, when he's in a situation, in critical periods, with what he thinks is right. And the phrase was, he's never jeopardised what they're trying to build here, just to sort of make him feel a bit safer by i.e. picking a full strength side. He talked about the importance of getting some of these players game time with Europe starting next week, and he not to be able to call on play if he hadn't done, he would have to call on some of these players, whether it be through injury to first team players or key starters or whatever it might be going forward. And if they had no game time, they would be in a really bad position. So that's why he justified making all those changes. Whether that will fly with Spurs fans, I don't know, but that was his logic behind there. And he also talked about he was asked about the boos that quite a few Spurs fans had, notably when Lucas Bergvall got taken off on the 62 minutes, and he came back with quite a sort of typically bullish Ange response, saying, "I don't do substitutions by poll, mate." And he talked about the fact that Bergvall hasn't had many minutes recently and didn't want to overload him and put him in his position where I guess he could be at risk of injury, and he thought he was outstanding as well. So how the Spurs fans will take to that particular comment, I didn't think it was a sort of completely, a slapping down of those fans. He said they can feel whatever they want to feel, but it was more him sort of asserting his authority and that he's the one that calls the shots. And that's pretty much it when it comes to Ange's comments. Like I said, he's hoping to use this from a positive point of view. I mean, one big negative from the game as well was that Wilson Odobert came off injured in the first half with what looked like to be a hamstring. It's not quite clear exactly. He was asked about it afterwards, and he said he wasn't quite sure, but it looked fairly significant. So that doesn't sound great, to be honest, which is a real shame for him, given he's just signed for 30 million from Burnley. We were just remarking on it when he had the first few touches. He looked like he's got quite a nice balance to his game. I think the first time I've seen him live, although I guess he came on against Arsenal. But yeah, fingers crossed it's not a long injury for him. And then just final thoughts. Ange needed this, I guess. I don't think it's a wholly convincing performance, obviously, by any stretch. So it's not gonna, the people that are starting or the fans that are starting to doubt him, it's not going to change their minds, I guess, anytime soon. But ultimately, as we've spoken about a lot recently, results are what really matter. And they won, and they're still in this competition. And if they can pick themselves up from here, start playing anything like they were last season when it was going well, then with his style of play, when it's good, as Mark Robbins talked a lot about in his press conference, he was really praising Ange for his style of play, then it can theoretically win them a cup and finally get them that silverware they're so desperate to experience. I'm not sure every fan believes that. I know lots that don't, but personally I do think that it is possible, but they need to be playing a lot better than this.